Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 20th, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting. We're going to go into an executive session to consider the purchase, for the reason of considering the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate property identified as town-owned property, parcel B, behind 34 School Street. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, to reconvene an open session. I'll take a motion to move into executive session.
I make a motion to move into executive session for the purposes outlined by the chairman.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 20th, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting. I wonder if something's going on. Is there a special interest group here or anything? I don't know. So I'll read the agenda first. At 7 o'clock, we have citizens input. 7:05, we have an Eagle Scout proclamation. 7:10, we're going to continue a public hearing, the municipal conversion permit. The continuance is due to a request from the builder to a later date so they can comply with the board's request for a traffic survey. 7:15, Council on Aging, Human Services Advisory Executive Board will be making a presentation. 7:25, change of manager, the Foxborough Regional Center for the Performing Arts, doing business as the Orpheum Theater. 7:40, discussion on the grade crossings in town. 8:10, police chief recruitment and recommendation. 8:30, selectmen's update. 8:35, town manager's update, and then we'll have a few action items. But we'll have the birthday girl, Amanda, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Happy birthday. Say happy birthday to Amanda, by the way.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, anybody here for citizens input?
Is this what it is?
I take that as a yes.
How long do I have?
5 minutes.
I never spoke for 5 minutes before.
Time's up.
I only have two things that I wanted to speak about. Being a citizen of town for 47 years and having served on the school committee for 6 years and 6 other town assignments, maybe a total of 40, I appreciate what you, the selectmen, do individually, what your family's commitment is, and how challenging it is. And I have a lot of respect for your love for the town, and I want to thank you. And the other point I wanted to make is I'm hearing things about, Bill maybe be leaving. And in my time in town, I've seen a lot of officials, different department heads. I think Bill has done a great job as a town manager. And Bill, I want to wish you well, whatever you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizens input? All right, great, we'll move on. Eagle Scout proclamation, come on up front. Parents can come too. All righty, welcome. Official citation, Foxborough Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, on the occasion of this Eagle Court of Honor, commends Corey Wagner Hall, Troop 32, Boy Scouts of America, in achieving the highest rank of Eagle Scout. Recognition is given to Corey Wagner Hall for your Eagle Scout project to create signage for the entrance to Cohasset River Park. Corey worked closely with the Conservation Committee to update the existing signage and to give the property a fresh start. With the support of the commission, Corey changed the sign to read Cohasset River Preserve, commemorating a new beginning for the park. Prior to commencing with the upgrades and repairs to the sign, Corey methodically planned out this project and presented it to the Conservation Commission. With great attention to detail and forethought, Corey prepared and provided a detailed bill of materials and construction plans with instructions to the Conservation Commission that would allow any further group or organization to create or update the Conservation Commission signs in a consistent manner. Following his own plans and instructions, Corey was able to repair the rotted signs at the Harold B. Clark Town Forest and at the Kersey Point Boat Launch. Congratulations on your achievement to the rank of Eagle Scout. May this recognition express our appreciation for the time spent envisioning and planning the repair and upgrade to the signage at the Cocasset River Preserve and for developing a standard for future improvements. The Board of Selectmen is very proud and grateful for the successful efforts and would like to join your fellow Scouts, family, and friends in paying honor and tribute to you for this splendid achievement and earning the rank of Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America. This citation is given under the seal of the town of Foxborough on this 20th day of August, 2019. Signed by the Board of Selectmen, Mark Elfman, Leah Gibson, Ed O'Leary, Dave Feldman, and Chris Mitchell. Congratulations.
Let's come forward for a picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do one.
Come on up here. We got Foxborough reporter here. I'd love to take a picture with you.
Doing it out front or?
We'll go up front? Yeah.
Thank you.
Why don't we both slide in here, we can get it. Okay, guys, everybody has to lean in and do this. Thank you.
So at this point, myself and Leah have to recuse ourselves, so Ed, if you would.
Make a motion to continue a public hearing to Thursday, September 12th at 7:05 PM per applicant request, and to ensure all 3 voting members of the Board of Selectmen are in attendance. I intend to read the letter that we had received from the applicant for the reason for the movement of tonight's meeting to a later time. This is addressed to the chairman of the board, Dr. Elfman. Dear Dr. Elfman, on behalf of my client, Douglas A. King Builders Incorporated, I request that you continue the public hearing scheduled for August 20th at 7:15 PM to September 10th. I spoke with Mr. Gallagher, the town engineer, about having the town traffic consultant, Parray Corporation, produce a memo answering the questions posed by the board at the public hearing last night. He anticipates it will be ready prior to Labor Day, which will give the board time to review the date prior to the September 10th meeting. Based on this information, I make a motion to continue the public hearing to Thursday, September 12th, 2019 at 7:05 PM per applicant request, and to ensure that all 3 voting members of the Board of Selectmen are in attendance.
Second.
Motion made, it was seconded, all those in favor?
All in favor?
Great, thank you. All right, Millie. You're off.
Hi, I'm Millie Green, Chairperson of the Foxborough Council on Aging and Human Services Advisory Board.
Helen is the vice chair, and it is our belief that the town of Foxborough should commit to commission a feasibility study of a new facility serving the entire community of Foxborough. The current Foxborough Senior Center functions as a prominent resource hub and focal point for Foxborough's growing senior population through the Council on Aging Department, as well as a support site for residents of all ages through the Human Services Department. We envision a new center focusing on the increasing needs of all residents while providing opportunities to promote Foxborough as a healthy, unified community with a focus on age-friendly initiatives, allowing its citizens to age in place. We must plan for the expanding demand for services and for shifting interests and needs for the town of Foxborough. We, the Council on Aging, Human Services Advisory Executive Board, are asking for the support of the Board of Selectmen to authorize funds for the town of Foxborough to hire a professional firm to survey and produce a feasibility study to analyze the town's need for a new center. Over the last 3 weeks, we have collected 235 residents' signatures of support for this motion. I would like to invite Mark Craig, our director, to come up, if it's okay, and answer any of your questions and give you some statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Great job. Hey, Mark.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Very good. We're all here for Amanda's birthday. Everyone's here. Yeah, so as Millie said, any questions you guys have, I'd be happy to answer. The past year, I presented to this board a year ago tomorrow, actually, right before I came on. So I know you have updated questions and would love to answer anything you have.
Any questions?
Not necessarily a question at the moment, but a comment. You've done a phenomenal job in the last year, so congratulations.
We
Thank you.
can't hear you. People can't hear you. They just
Oh,
said
okay.
from behind.
I said he did a great job this past year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions, though?
I'm sure we will have questions. I didn't know that this
Yeah.
was kind of where this was going, so I haven't had a chance to formulate really any questions yet.
Yeah, I think we're still at the early stages where maybe get a little subcommittee together, someone from your committee, maybe someone from our board, get together with Bill and talk about the feasibility study, what that would entail. I know I sat down with you last week and we talked a little bit about it, and I know I've been hearing from seniors that the center's getting small. And tell us a little bit about, Mark, while you're here though, some of the tight constraints that you were explaining to me. Again, this is early for us, but this would be a good time for us to hear that.
Sure. So obviously the building, people say the new senior center, even though it's 21 years old at this point, was designed as, kind of the forefront of senior centers 21 years ago. And at this point, so just to put numbers into perspective, last July, averaged about 48 people per day. This past July, we had 85 seniors per day. Our peak was May, we had averaging 98 people per day coming into the building. So I'm happy about that. Actually, this past Monday, when it was 90-something degrees yesterday, and we had 123 people come into the space. Which is, it's limiting. The parking is tight. I'm sure a lot of people will attest the parking is tight. And we kind of are double stacking programs. I've converted our lobby to a space where we can have programs. I've converted our computer room to a small classroom to try and fit as much as we possibly can into the building that we currently have. And we're working it. We're working with it. We've extended our hours on Tuesdays and Wednesdays to try and fit in as many programs as possible. My personal philosophy is to try and have a large array of programs. We started off with very safe activities. We're getting a little bit more interesting, things that are kind of far out and unique. And at this point, we're really rocking it. I mean, we really are. I mean, the number of people that are coming into the building every single day is impressive. Even what I said to this board a year ago, I wouldn't have imagined this conversation starting so soon. No secret that I came from another community where we combined the recreation department and the senior center to open an intergenerational building. That process, from the first time it was mentioned until doors opening, took 5 to 6 years. And a few weeks ago, the Human Service Council on Aging Advisory Board sort of had an inkling of mention and then took off running with it, which applaud Millie, obviously, and kind of gained support a lot faster than I had imagined. I would never imagine a room full of people so quickly. So I think that, as you said, very beginning stages, but we all know that things take time, and certainly allocations take time, and it seems like the seniors are supportive of any sort of next steps.
Could you also explain, we know parking's a huge issue, obviously there's not a lot, not any places you can expand to. But tell us, could we build up, could we build, make things in a, I know the answer to that, but let everybody else, what's the basement like, things like that?
I mean, I have no professional opinion. Obviously, I'm just a guy that likes to run programs for seniors and kids, but at the same time, I've heard from people who worked on the last building, and you can't go up because the roof is so-and-so, and you can't go down because so-and-so. I can't speak professionally to that, but at the same time, I know that if that building is used for additional programs up or down, still don't have the parking to fit in. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually stacking larger programs opposite programs that might have only 1 or 2 people, like Shine appointments, just to make sure we don't have parking problems. But, I mean, there were 3 different times yesterday that the parking lot was full across the day. So it does happen. That's kind of where we are at this point. Yeah, it's on all the time. I mean, there are times if you drive by it Wednesday at 3 o'clock, there might be only 4 or 5 cars in the parking lot. That's not a peak time. So there are times when there's not that many people. If people are watching from home and they drive by at that very moment, there's not any people there, well, that's just an off time. So that's where we are.
And one last thing, just to put the buzz out there, just to get the thought going, because we discussed it a little bit, the difference between maybe just having a senior center or a dual senior center rec center. Are there pros and cons and?
There's definitely a lot of pros and cons, obviously. For the community that I was previously in, it was the right opportunity at the right time for that town. It also allowed the building to be a little bit larger than a typical just one department building, because both departments needed a space. Both departments needed a space, and several years before, the town manager came to me and said, kind of have a far-out plan that's many years in the making, but at the same time, we need to plan for the future. And it worked for that town. My previous to that, I was in another community where the rec department, we actually took over the old senior center because the senior center moved into a new space. That was right for that town at that time. So I think that if part of the feasibility study is kind of looking at that, in both instances, the feasibility study was actually the ones that came out and said, you have 2 different departments that are looking for space. It would be cost efficient for the town to do one facility at some point in the future. It would be cost efficient to do one facility rather than 2 separate buildings that are essentially the same.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank Millie and your entire crew for being here tonight, and Mark for a great job this past year. I agree. I share the same sentiment that Chris mentioned earlier. I want to just say that this topic came up during my monthly meeting with the seniors on talking about topics that are important to them. And we talked about what's the next step in the process, and that is to sort of find out what the interest level is, and then perhaps look at a possibility of getting some funding at a town meeting to do a feasibility study, because that's the first step in this process. I agree that is the first step, and I think this is really where the direction you need to take. Mark is an interesting spot because he's new, and he's not sitting here advocating one way or the other. He's saying, look, this is what I'm hearing this is the need, and he's actually witnessing it from the perspective of having successful programs in his building that, that guess what, we're having some real problems with space. And that's a success story. So I mean, I'm really glad to hear that, but I'm also concerned that we really do need to take next steps to try and make sure that we accommodate the need here in the community. So let's not forget that the important thing, that this is a growing segment of the population in this community. It's 25% plus and growing. And us baby boomers, I'm in that crowd, by the way, who are starting to get older, and by the way, their needs are starting to grow to the point where, and I love to see the active seniors and all folks like you being involved, because it's really important for the community to stay vibrant and to age in place. I thought that statement was really well said. So I think it's really a good step in the right direction. We don't know the answers. The questions you've raised are great questions. We just don't know. I think we know the answers at this point. I think
Right.
that's
Way
why you
too
bring
early.
an outside person in to start looking at that and come up with some objective responses to those kinds of issues. So I think this is a really good first step.
That would be a
in-
town meeting vote.
It would be a town meeting
to,
vote to do that. So, and
appropriate.
I also think that there's been some expression given to me that I think that the Friends of the Seniors would actually help with that to some degree as well, showing that they've got a stake in this as well. So they're actually willing to, as I understand it, to actually put some money into this process too, which I think is really helpful. I think that would be, sort of put skin in the game, so to speak, to show that this is an important piece of that. Not, I'm not looking at a significant amount, but I think it's important that if you do that, it's a demonstration to the rest of the community that they're serious about it as well. And I think that's important, to show that level of commitment on both sides. So, having said that, I'll probably get shot at later for saying that, but that's okay. I think it's important to lay that out there, because, when you do stuff like this, people want to know that there's a vested interest in the process, and that there is skin in the game from both sides. And I think it actually helps the process when you get to a town meeting forum where people, will want to know why this is important and why this value is good for the community.
So we'll, oh, yeah.
May I speak? I'm the president of the Friends, and he was looking at me when he...
You're absolutely right.
Historically, Ed remembers, because he was on the Human Services Board
Yeah.
in the mid-'90s, mid to late '90s, when it was a separate board from the Council on Aging. It was, right?
Yes.
And they merged, through all the town processes, for one board and so forth. Prior to that, the Council on Aging was in 3 or 4 places. Very bad stuff. The Friends in the original building were greatly involved in fundraising with merchants, businessmen, and individuals. And, I can't speak for the Friends without a vote of the board. But as an individual, and I can tell you, people that go to the senior center, they go to the Friends meeting. And, I don't see anybody that doesn't want to help.
Great, thank you.
Do you need bigger microphones, or could you all move a little bit closer to your microphone and talk a little louder for us? We appreciate that.
Okay.
We're all seniors.
We somehow noticed that, but that's thanks for clarifying that.
Very clear earlier, and she needs to be commended. Thank you very much.
I'm loud.
So what we'll do now, and no one's ever said I was quiet before, we'll get a subcommittee together. And we'll see when we can get it on maybe the special town meeting if in the fall, for some funding. So we'll get Millie, one of our board members. We'll certainly get the Friends, Mark involved. We'll get a little subcommittee meeting, figure out how, certainly Bill, and we'll get to the next step. All right? Sound good? All right, everybody. Great. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you. All right, everybody, we're going to continue with the meeting.
What a rowdy crew.
I know, the loudest we've had. Keep them under control, will you?
So you put it on, or?
All right, next on the agenda. All right, next on the agenda, we've got just in time, 7:25. Change of manager, Foxborough Regional Center for the Performing Arts, doing business as the Orpheum. Mr. DeBellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How are you?
It's nice to be back, and it's nice to come after a happy group. That's like the happiest group I've ever seen here.
Was that
It's been like this since you left, Jim. Every meeting is like this.
Come
How
on,
do you
say it all
fo-
together. You miss me a little bit.
How do
Bill,
you
a little
follow
bit.
that?
A little bit.
I know. It's like, I'm so happy. I'm like, oh, if I continue.
All right,
right, so,
whenever you're ready. Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Now
thank
that
you.
the seniors have,
Sure.
not all of you.
Janet's getting the door.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm here tonight representing the Board of Directors at the Marilyn Rodman Performing Arts Center at the Orpheum. So, if you recall, the board, and I'll make some introductions as we go along here. So, the board had granted us a full liquor license, and at the time, Teresa Devlin was our alcohol manager. Since then, her husband has retired, and she moved, both of them have moved to New Hampshire. So the board got together and unanimously voted to bring on Rob Canfield, to the left of me, as our new alcohol manager. We're very happy with Rob as an employee slash volunteer and also as a community leader. We've got confidence that he's going to do a great job. And Rob was instrumental in setting up the beginning works at the Orpheum 2 years ago when we all came together. So inside your application, you're going to see Rob's resume, his certifications for Serve Safe, tips, allergen awareness training, crowd management, and some other relevant qualifications. So I'll turn it over to Rob in a minute for question and answer as our alcohol manager. But I wanted to take a step back and talk a little bit about some of the background stuff of the theater. It's not a traditional liquor license that you issue to a restaurant or a bar, and we've had some changes over the last couple weeks that I think it's a little germane to bring that up. So about 2 years ago, a group of about 20 like-minded people that wanted to do three things with the Orpheum got together as on a volunteer basis and no money at the end game for this, all volunteers. So one of the first reasons is we wanted to preserve the building. It's going on almost 100 years. It's not protected under the Historic Preservation Act or anything like that. And there's some of us that thought it was going to be turned into condos or something else or knocked down. So some of us got on board for that. Other people got on board because they wanted to they had an active interest in bringing uptown or downtown development into the area. And as you guys know, you're going through it with the fire station. It's a difficult thing. And rather than talk the talk, we got together and said, let's try to do it and let's fill up this building. And the third reason, I think the majority of the people were very interested in bringing back arts to the community and providing it community benefits. So for those three reasons, over the last 2 years, we went towards getting a 501c3 nonprofit status, and we just got it a couple weeks ago. So we're excited to keep going on in that effort. So 2 weeks ago, we hired an interim, a new interim executive director. And I'm just gonna, I gotta read a little bit because of her qualifications. So, okay. Her name is Emily Garvin, and she worked as the founder, the director, the choreographer, and the manager of a group called Inspiration Performing Troupe. Her nonprofit mission has been to use the talents of local children to give back to the community and to give children a professional and exciting performance experience close at home. Her award-winning theater program called Sharing the Spotlight works with underserved youth, including those with special needs, life-threatening illnesses, and financial difficulties. Ms. Garvin's work here at the theater has been outstanding, and we look forward to a long, successful relationship with her. Ms. Garvin grew up coming to the theater and performing at the Orpheum when she was a kid. She's an area resident, and she understands our community's mission, and she's has theater experiences to succeed for all of us, and we're all excited to have her. It's a good fit. Our mission is pretty much what her mission was, and this is her first real-time, full-time job. She put aside her graduate school to focus on this, and to put it in her words, it was a dream come true for her. So it's a good time for that transition, and it works good for the board. So With me tonight is Rachel Calabrese. She's the vice president of the executive board of directors. I'm going to hold off on you for 1 second, Bob. The other executive board member is Carl Schuster. He's our treasurer. He lives in Walpole. He wasn't able to make it here tonight, I don't think. Nope. So backed by the board, we have the executive board, we have a full board of directors, and I think it's, and Paul Beck. Paul Beck was here last time. He's our secretary, and he's on vacation this week. So behind the executive board, and I think it's important to thank these volunteers, on our board of directors from the beginning is Laura Canfield, Jared Craig, Stephanie Flaherty, Eve Ketty, Steve Katay, Cindy Haddad-Drew, Beverly Lord, Michael Lovett, Tony McDonald, Jim Politano, Lynn Powers, Jim Slattery, and last but not least, who really busts her butt for this town, is Linda Walsh. And a lot of these people are here tonight to show support. We actually, over the 2 years, we now have employees. In addition to Emily Garvin and Rob here, Kristen Gustafson is our publicity manager. Eric Hausman is our facility support person. Lisa Stowell is our concessions manager, and Chrissy Worth works in our marketing and children's coordinator. And behind them, there's a whole bunch of volunteers. So I thought it was important. This theater is bigger than one person. It's going to continue. It was set up as a nonprofit in perpetuity for as long as we can do it. So we're committed to it. And our mission, again, is to provide services to the community. So to do that, we provide it at cost, sometimes free, and we need to supplement that with other performances. So this beer and wine license helps us do that. We bring in comedians and all different type of thing to supplement what we have to give away. So at the end of the day, it just means that we have to work harder to break even, and this helps us. It's an old building. It's a big pink building on the corner. It needs a new roof. We're hoping to come back for a new sign that the town meeting overwhelmingly support. So we'll be in front of the zoning board for that. We've got all the pieces in place, and with your support, I'd like to introduce Rob. I'm sorry, I did forget Bob Siteman.
Yeah, I was going to just jump right in there and be like.
So Bob Siteman is our theater manager. He's their theater manager. He is there to do the lights, the sound. He's the person that greets everybody when they comes in. Over the last 2 weeks, he's probably put in countless hours to keep this theater going.
Past 2 years.
Yeah.
Past 2 years.
Unbelievable amount of
Yeah, so
hours.
he's there, and we couldn't do it without him, and I just wanted to, that's why I kept you separate and best for the last. So.
Quickly, if you don't mind, we also just wanted to say the new director that we hired, she shadowed the executive director of the Stadium Theater, Kathy Ledke, for the past 9 years. She's been there. She watched Kathy Ledke take it from a very small Stadium Theater in Woonsocket to the point where they were getting $8 million in grants and have 4 new buildings and have completely brought up the area of Woonsocket. So she's got a ton of experience, and we're very excited to have her on board. So just
Thank
wanted
you.
to say that. Yeah.
So on that point, I'll turn it over to the board if they have any questions for Rob or any of us.
Rob, tell us a little bit about your experience and why you want to be the manager.
Well, sure. So my experience in relation to alcohol, or to wine and beer.
It's going downhill
Yeah,
now.
there you go. Sorry. We didn't practice this one. No, so I've been doing, for the past couple of years, I've had a promotion business for alcohol, for spirits, primarily starting out with wine and beer and then moving into more of the hard liquors and focusing on whiskeys and scotches and bourbons and to more of the distilled liquors. But what that does is I go out and do education and promotion for different companies that hire me, like Blanton's or Buffalo. Excuse me?
Buffalo Wild Wings?
Thank you, Buffalo Trace. Thank you. Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, Glenfiddich, Balvenie. So I go out and do promotional work for them, and as well as educational work for them. I do private dinners. Like I did something back earlier this month at the Hotel Viking down in Newport for Glenfiddich, where it was a dinner where we did Scotch pairings with each course. So that's how I got into this business. That's been about a couple of years. The Orpheum has always been something, or the Maryland Rodman Performing Arts Center, has always been something that, since we moved to town in 1995, has been an important part of our lives. In fact, where's the picture, Laura? We're not taking it out. So there's a picture from 1999, right? Is that the year? 1999, from my first production at the Orpheum, which was West Side Story, and we got a copy of the Foxborough Reporter from that week tonight that had a picture of us and some other people. So it's kind of weird that it all happened tonight, right? So
Now you have to show the picture.
I gotta see that.
Okay.
yeah, that's a family picture when the kids were really little before Bo. So the Orpheum has always been really, really important to me. When Jim and Rachel reached out and said they needed some help getting through this transition period because Teresa had moved away, this was a good extension for me to go ahead and get the additional licensing and permits or certifications that I needed to build my other business, my promotional business, because I had been certified in off-premise delivery of alcohol, but not on-premise. So, and that had limited some of my opportunities. So by going and getting these additional certifications in order to support what we need to do at the theater, it also allows me to expand what I can do from a business perspective. So that's really where I am right now. My interest is to help the theater through the transition period and then see what comes next. It also allowed me to, or it gave me the motivation to go off and seek those additional certifications that I needed. What's very important to me, as I told Rachel last week when she and I sat down, is that as we move forward, that we are very conservative of how we interpret any of the rules around alcohol consumption and pouring of alcohol. So we need to make sure that anybody that is serving alcohol has the appropriate certifications and the appropriate training. We will review, on a regular basis, pouring sizes, incident logs, how you track things, how you record things, inventory, all those kind of things, so that we make sure that the business is doing everything in the way that it should be being done at this point. So that's just very, very important to me. So.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Oh, awesome. Great presentation. Ed?
I make a motion to approve Foxborough Regional Center for the Performing Arts, DBA Orpheum Theater, application for a change of manager from Teresa Devlin to Robert Canfield.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for all
be
the
back.
work you do with the theater, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing more we love than watching you guys kids there.
And the AC worked great last Sunday.
Good. We have Jimmy Slattery in to whack it with a hammer every now and then. It works out wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say. See, when you said 90s, I wanted to see that 90s hair. Love it.
Nice job, Laura.
We're next going to have a presentation or a discussion on the grade crossing in town. Oh, you're already up here. Hi. Good evening.
If it was on, you shut it off.
For those of you at home, we're just trying to get our AV going.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name's Todd Hassett. With me is Donald DeMoro. We're both County Street residents, longtime residents, 27 years for me, 31 for Don. In the last couple of years, we've experienced, in our neighborhood in particular, a lot of egregious activity relative to the freight rail behind County Street and Belcher Court along the Spring Street crossing. We did advance the board a set of, an outline of what we wanted to just cover, and we'd certainly welcome a conversation with you.
I'd say just make a presentation with a PowerPoint.
Okay.
We have it. Bill, we're gonna continue on anyway. People at home won't be able to see the PowerPoint, but I'm sure somewhere along the line we'll get it on our website.
So we starting with the PDF or the PowerPoint? PowerPoint?
I guess what you have is a PDF,
Okay.
and we did provide a PowerPoint exhibit from the Mass DOT for informational reading for the board, but we weren't planning on discussing that tonight, so it looks like this.
Okay, yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said, Don and I have been longtime County Street residents. We, in the last couple of years, have experienced quite a change in the rail activity in our neighborhood, and we know it's impacted several other neighborhoods in the community. We are, as you know, the closest crossing to the Mansfield train yard, so we've experienced a lot more of the early morning issues that have happened. And just quickly, there was reconstruction of the rail in the summer of 2017, 2 years ago. And the CSX freight activity has largely been moved to 12 midnight to 5 a.m. is sort of their prime time to come through the community. So as you know, 1:30 in the morning, they come from Framingham into Mansfield, and then 4:30 or thereabouts in the morning, they head back the other way. During this time, the number of cars that the freight train has been carrying has changed from 20 to 25 on a typical run to some upwards of 100, 80 to 100 cars. The community experienced a number of crossings being blocked. I know the police department's documented quite a few. Just in our neighborhood, I think in a one-year period, there was something like 35 extended blockings of Spring Street where public safety couldn't get to our neighborhood. School buses couldn't pick up the children in our neighborhood. We've had excessive idling behind our homes and whistleblowing, coupling and disruption early morning over an extended period. They've had mechanical problems that have caused some of the crossings. We've had 3 or 4 car fires. Most recently, as you know, up on North Street, there was one. And we did provide a few photos in your packet of a couple of samples. There was a derailment behind Belcher Court about a year ago. There's a photo of that as well. We do have a number of video samples of what we've experienced that are available to view on YouTube, and which I know many of the board members have seen. In the summer of 18, a year ago, the rail that was reconstructed behind our homes was torn up and moved, and a side rail, a second rail, was put in. And this was, we were told, put in to alleviate the blocking of Spring Street, that this would allow the freight company quicker access to move cars out of the yard and essentially extends the Mansfield train yard into our neighborhood. Although I will say the Mass DOT officials have told us that CSX is not allowed to store cars on this second rail that's been built. We've had extended periods where cars have been left behind all of our homes. And again, I think we gave you pictures of that as well. We've, in the spring, experienced Sunday morning trains at 4:30. So Monday through Friday wasn't enough. We had a period of about 9 out of 10 consecutive Sundays where there was a 4:30 a.m. train with the whistles, et cetera, through the neighborhood. So we've attempted over the last 2 years to work with Bill, town manager, our state rep and state senator, the police chief, the DPW director, the health department. We've worked with the train master for CSX Freight. We've had weekend meetings with the CEO of Mass Coastal, who did all of the construction, and they oversee a lot of the dispatch for this region. Representative Barrows has been good enough to host some community meetings. We've had, I think, 3 of those where we've got input from other parts of the community. And more recently, we went to a series of small group meetings that Bill helped coordinate for us, the last of which was in late March, which was probably our most productive meeting. And since that time, the behavior has certainly improved, although it's sort of a moving, as Bill says, it's like the balloon that you squeeze on one side and you get that, but something else pops. So we have, in fact, as recently as this weekend, we had cars parked behind the residence of Belcher Court and part of County Street from Friday until yesterday. So also in 2018, we have 8 grade crossings here in town. We don't have infrastructure, as you know, really around these crossings like other communities do. 3 of the 8 were reconstructed, Spring Street, Leonard, and North Streets. And we still have 5 that we were told would be done over the next year or 2. Our general concerns are certainly public safety, access to the neighborhoods when the crossings are blocked, the blocking of intersections. We're concerned about what's being transported through town. You know, we've been told that it's construction debris in a lot of cases, and it's covered, but as we've seen and we demonstrated with the videos and photos, many of the cars are open, there's garbage, there's a number of chemicals. We've reached out to the local health folks who have told us we need to deal with the EPA. The Mass DOT has told us that they can't really tell us what's being transported because of that terrorists might know, and then they'd know, you know, I don't know. But bottom line is, we feel the community has inadequate infrastructure around our crossings. We're concerned about resident safety, both for our young residents and our elderly. And we believe with all the disruption, it's impacted the quality of life, certainly in our neighborhood, but we believe throughout the community that's impacted by these other 7 crossings. And so we'd like to share with the board that we continue to be concerned that the behavior is not consistent, it changes. We have idling, we have excessive whistles early in the morning, blocked crossings, car storage that's extended out of the Mansfield yard. And when we think about the future, we've been told that the new rail supports speeds up to 45 miles an hour, which is much faster than we see the trains come through town currently. It will support larger and longer trains. CSX Freight has been very open with us and honest about their interest in expanding the use of this line. This is a productive line for them, and they'll make the trains as long as they can possibly make it. And with the South Coast Rail expansion, we've been told that this is going to, the economic development in the South Coast is going to push more freight that's going to come through our community from Mansfield to Framingham. And in addition, the state officials have told us that the state rail plan long-term includes non-Boston-centric commuting. In other words, they've suggested people could commute to Framingham from Mansfield, and that at some future time, 5, 10 years from now, there may be other uses of the track, the Framingham secondary line. So we're here to sort of summarize to the board. Many of you know what you've heard some of our conversations. You know what we've lived through the last couple of years. But we're here tonight to really ask the board to consider taking a more proactive approach now to see about improving pedestrian and vehicular safety, to consider installing gates at our 8 crossings in the community, and any other related infrastructure improvements, particularly in the center of town. So we'd ask that the board consider pursuing some sort of evaluation and proactive approach to initiating improvements and changes in the community, ultimately resulting, we hope, in the town being in a position to consider voting for a quiet zone throughout the community where whistles would only be blown for emergency purposes. And there are 29 other eastern Massachusetts communities that already have quiet zones. Closest to us being the town of Norfolk, who's had it. They've had it so long they couldn't tell me when it was implemented. But we really think that this would be a huge improvement to the quality of life for our residents. This line dissects the entire community. And we've taken a lot of the brunt of it because we're near the train yard, but we know it's impacted many of the other areas, including the center. So we'd like the board to consider, more safety measures, which would include installation of rail gates. Thank you very much. So that's essentially what we wanted to say tonight, Mr. Chairman. And we also provided you the Mass DOT's outline on how a community pursues establishing a quiet zone, which we're not in a position to do right now. We need to get the community to that level. So thank you.
Any questions from the board?
So I read through the Mass DOT's requirements or criteria for quiet zones. Do you have any sense of cost per crossing, of what it would cost the community?
I've been told that on average it's about $120,000 per crossing. Some of their literature suggests it could be as little as $60,000, but certainly when I think about Cohasset Street, for example, that would be on the higher end, I would suspect. It's a more challenging crossing. So, so if we said 120 on average, that's about $1 million times 8.
And the town would foot that? That wouldn't be a CSX expense, or?
No, I think we'd want to work with our state rep in conjunction with Mass DOT. If they're looking for faster rail, we're not safe at higher speeds, and they would have to be a partner with us, if not fund a good portion of the installations.
Jay, do you want to come up and speak to that? Because I have a question on that. Jay's shaking his head no.
No.
Of course not. Has either of those entities ever become a partner and help share the bill on that?
Yeah, the rail that Todd spoke of that extended the straight through, the MBTA, MassDOT paid for that. It was over $1 million investment. And the new switching gear was their investment as well. But CSX the freight hauler doesn't pay for any of this stuff. This is the cost of doing business, if you will, in Massachusetts. And our Mass DOT, owns all the rail lines and is responsible for all the improvements. So we would advocate with the town's support for help with grade crossings. And I think it was, with what was brought up a couple of years ago, we finally got Spring Street done, and then they moved on and did a couple of others, but there's still others left to do. And I think if you pick up the paper any morning and read about whatever calamity happened the day before, they're under siege to try to right a lot of wrongs.
So what I'm talking about, though, is the actual cost of the quiet zone. Is that something that they have participated in before?
I'm not absolutely certain on that. I think, again, it would have to be supported by the town, and then we would go to the powers that be and say, look, we've got a community that is overwhelmingly supporting quiet zones. What's the next step? And then, obviously, they'd have to investigate the cost for all the at-grade crossings. And again, this is a little different because it's freight and not commuter rail, so the frequency is different. So I don't know what all the parameters are, but the work that they put together, the PowerPoint from MassDOT's pretty thorough in terms of approval process and who's got to say yes.
And the freight is federally regulated?
Yes.
So is there-
The whole thing is really.
The quiet
federally
zone
reg-
is federally approved.
So
Actually, it's not
Would
at the
there be
state level.
possibly federal dollars that we could go
Perhaps,
after?
maybe some grants or, who knows? That would be up to our congressman. If he were here, you could ask him to speak to that.
So I was under the impression, I guess wrongly, that the 3 grade crossings that were done was done by CSX.
No.
They were not. They were done by
Mass
Mass
DOT.
DOT.
Yes.
Yeah, and MassDOT, they did Spring Street. I think that was one of the first ones that got done because it was just horrific. And they went in and managed to get that one done pretty quickly.
Sort of like Cohasset.
Yeah, Cocasset. I mean, and I keep asking about where that is on the list because that one is, again, very difficult to traverse either direction.
Oh, yeah. Some of us
Chairman,
have lost.
I can
3
speak to that
times.
one, is that I've been speaking with Roger Hill, who's been following that very closely to see when that could be done. You see that our DPW folks went out there to try and at least remedy some of the problem out there. Obviously, it's not completely done, but the indication that I have is that it's going to happen sometime in the spring of next year. We originally were told it was going to happen the fall of this year.
Right.
And that's been pushed due to other competing projects to be pushed.
Some of the things that just happened federally, that speed control for the trains, there was the collision, or the crash in Pennsylvania because of speed. So the feds told everyone that they had, in Mass included, had to put in all these speed control things. So a bunch of people that were working on even this line had to come off and then go do that to continue operations. So there's been a number of hurdles that just keep happening. I think you said it best, it's like pinching a balloon. Where's it going to go? And it's been a challenge. So, but we'll certainly, again, if we follow the way the format is and we get the support, then we go to work for you to try to get some financial support.
Mr. Chairman, so, first of all, I want to thank Don and Todd for being here tonight, and also Representative Barrows, and Senator Feeney for participating in a lot of the process, and the board has taken an active role in this discussion. It's been a long 2 years, and I share your pain in this one. This was not an easy issue to resolve and address, but I appreciate your patience and your efforts to try and make this happen. We've gotten to know each other very well over the past 2 years about this particular issue. I will say, though, that there are some concerns that everybody should be aware of with respect to quiet zones, particularly from the town as regard to liability. And that if, in fact, we do go with a quiet zone discussion, and this is not to say I'm for it, against it, or whatever, you need to be fully informed about this issue, is that the town does assume some liability in the event that somebody does get hurt and the trains do not exercise their horns during that period of time going through our town. So this is a challenge in the sense that I fully respect the request, because it is something that if I was living behind them, living in their position, I'd be doing the same exact thing. But it's my obligation as town manager to tell you that there are some challenges with that as well. That said, I do fully support the concept and notion of trying to put signalization and gates on those, because I agree that line is eventually going to become more active than it is even right now. Based upon the way rail is growing throughout the country, that's the way that that freight is being moved. Highways, of course, are becoming clogged, and so this is another way of moving the amount of commerce that needs to go throughout the country and throughout different parts of the state. So it's something that's going to be continuing to happen, and I think that we should be taking active steps. What that means, I think, is that we should, as a community, be putting together a subgroup that includes representation from this neighborhood, and perhaps other neighborhoods along this line to become more active in discussions with the representative, the state senator, as well as our congressional delegation, to become more active on this role and making sure that we're doing everything we can as representatives of this community to make sure that we're doing the proper protections that this community deserves. So I think a subgroup was represented from the board, represented from administration, and representatives from the state and federal agencies, as well as representatives from the neighborhood, I think would be an appropriate measure to take next.
I think that's what we'll do. Yeah, let's get
Great.
a group together and start looking at at least the gates, you know.
Right.
I mean, certainly,
Right.
the quiet zone on the back burner.
That's on the back
but,
burner,
but the
understood.
gates,
Right.
And see if we can get some funding, you know, from the state and federal level.
Great.
Right, great presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right. All right, a little ahead of schedule, but I think we can move on. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you at Police Chief recruitment and recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. At this time, what I'd like to do is go through the process that we worked on for the past several months in arriving at the conclusion that was reached earlier later last week, with respect to the selection of the next police chief. There was a process that was developed by the town manager, the assistant town manager, and police chief in consultation with the Board of Selectmen, and then reviewed with each of the candidates. This process to select the next police chief spanned approximately 4 months, beginning with the initial discussion and design of process in April of 2019. 2 candidates submitted their credentials for consideration, Lieutenant Richard Noonan and Lieutenant Mike Grace. Identified as a necessary and important first step in this process, a panel of experts was assembled to interview each candidate to garner recommendations based on the future of policing in the profession. The Future of Policing panel included nationally recognized experts on the issues of opioid addiction, gender equality, bias-based policing, hate crimes, and extremism and mental illness. The panel convened on July 26, 2019, and met with each of the candidates individually. Just to reinforce the significance of this panel, the individuals that served on that panel are the following. Professor Jack McDevitt, Northeastern University, expert on 21st century policing and bias-based policing. Professor Wendy Murphy, who was a member of the New England School of Law faculty, and she was an expert on gender issues, domestic and sexual violence. Elise Tavares, she was a doctor in Masters in Public Health, substance abuse advocate at Harvard University and the Kraft Center for Community Health, expert on substance abuse education, treatment, and rehabilitation. Robert Treston, a member of the Anti-Defamation League and the director, actually, of that league, from Boston, expert on implicit bias, hate crime, and extremism. And Sam Botsford, who was from the National Association of Mental Illness, a mental health advocate, expert on serving the needs of mentally ill. And all 5 of those members served in that first panel. A police chief assessment center was then conducted next on July 31st, 2019 at the Foxborough Town Hall. The assessment center panel was assembled and was facilitated by the outside consulting firm, the MMA Consulting Group. The MMA Consulting is regarded by many communities around the Commonwealth as one of the top firms for conducting assessment centers in this particular field. The panel the panel consisted of third-party facilitator, three retired police chiefs who evaluated each candidate on multiple police management-related topics. Another integral part of the process was the use of a community representative panel, which was panel number 3. A total of 13 individuals participated in representatives from Foxborough to interview each candidate. The community panel consisted of the school superintendent, the chairman of the school committee, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, the assistant town manager, human resource director, a member of the local clergy, the executive director of the YMCA, the fire chief, a member from the Stadium Advisory Committee, a member from the Foxborough Common Business Collaborative, the director of the Council on Aging and Human Services, and a representative from the Kraft Group. A representative from the Snyder Electorate was also invited to participate, but was unable to attend due to various scheduling conflicts. The Committee panel met with each of the candidates at Foxborough Town Hall on Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. The board will recall that there was a similar panel that was assembled during the last police chief selection process when Chief Baker was selected. Upon completion of all the selection process steps, I was then presented with the findings of each candidate. In keeping with the standard protocol, I then conducted a final one-on-one interview with each candidate. The Assistant Town Manager, Human Resource Director, observed and participated in this final interview. In the end, the candidate who attained the highest result from this process was Lieutenant Michael Grace. After reaching this conclusion, I met again with each candidate individually to announce the result. The candidates were afforded an opportunity to review the results with the Assistant Town Manager / Human Resource Director. At this time, I would like to present to the board the next chief of the Foxborough Police Department, Officer Michael Grace. Lieutenant. As a final step in this process, and following tonight's meeting with the board, it would be my intention to sit with Mike and negotiate a contract with him and present to the board for your review and consideration at an upcoming meeting. Currently, Chief Baker will be retiring in the first week of October. His plan is to spend the remainder of his time here in Foxborough preparing and assisting Mike to take over the police chief, take over as police chief following his departure. I do want to say also that I am very grateful to both candidates who did an outstanding job throughout this process. This was a very difficult choice because we are fortunate in this community to have two excellent candidates for this position. The board will recall we had a similar process with the fire chief, and that speaks well of the current administration, Chief Baker, as well as Chief O'Leary, former Chief O'Leary, who was part of this department, who had selected both of these individuals to work for this department several years ago. So we're fortunate that, and I've said this on several occasions, that we effectively have two chiefs running two departments, each in each two departments. We have two chiefs in the fire department, two chiefs in the police department, but there is one person that has to emerge as the top person, and this is the person that we have sitting here before you tonight. So I'm grateful to both Rich and to Mike for doing an outstanding job, and thank you for doing such a great job in this, and showing your professionalism throughout this process. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if there was a vote.
We don't vote. We just.
I do want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, Mr. Keegan, Chief Baker, my wife Kirsten, and Michael, Matthew, and Katie. My mom and dad are over there, and my mother-in-law, Edie. But more importantly, my colleagues at the Foxborough Police Department, and specifically my good friend, Rich Noonan, and my academy mate. It's an honor. I sit here today at the beginning of a journey that started many years ago. There was this police chief that probably no one knows in this room, Mr. Chief. I'm still going to call you Chief, okay?
That's okay.
He gave me a wonderful opportunity to serve this community as a patrol officer. One of the most special moments of my career and my life. And I learned very quickly about my second day in the police work. I need not so much need, but the importance of teamwork. On my first call, I needed a partner. As a shift commander, I needed a shift. As a lieutenant, I needed a command staff. And today I sit here as your new police chief, but I sit here because of the members of my team called the Foxborough Police Department and all their employees. They are an amazing group of people. The town of Foxborough is so fortunate. The personalities and the skill set that each one of them brings to this community is amazing, and we're so lucky. And I look forward to leading that team for many years in the future, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I look so forward to this opportunity. Thank you. Is that it?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm not sure if I can cross the line.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Congrats.
Thank you so much. Chief, many thank yous.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And Chief, thank you. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to say anything, or just?
I think enough was
been
said.
said? Okay. All right, fair enough.
refusing the spotlight?
I know.
He's moving on to October.
There you go. There you
Thank
go.
you so much.
All right. Oh, we're good? All right, good.
Thanks, Rich.
Next is your contract.
Yeah, that's right. That's the hard work, you know. So.
Congratulations to the family, too.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is Selectmen's update. Anybody on the board have anything to update us on?
I don't want to steal your thunder, but I was going to just mention the recreation program,
Oh.
unless you already had that on your.
I did not. Go
Okay,
ahead, please.
so, thank you to the recreation department that's just put on a very successful summer program. I think there was around 300 or so kids that were enrolled and 20-plus counselors. I know my kids went every day. People in this room, probably kids and grandkids went, and, you know, even though there was no playground there, they had more room for sandcastles, was the report at the end, and it was just a wonderful summer. So thank you to the staff and all the counselors that had a great summer with the kids.
Great job once again. Also under Selectmen's update, I was asked to read a little notice from the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds. William P. O'Donnell Registrar will be having office hours in Foxborough Thursday, September 12th, 2019, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at the Foxborough Town Hall, right here in the Gala Meeting Room, 40 South Street. The Register and members of his staff will be available to help and answer questions or concerns about any Registry of Deeds matter. Information will be available concerning the Massachusetts Homestead Act. Internet-ready computers will be on hand to print a recorded deed, confirm the status of a mortgage discharge, or check any other filing. And no appointment is needed. Again, it's going to be Thursday, September 12th, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, right here in the Gala Meeting Room. And then the last thing I have to talk about, where is it? Sorry. I think along with the other selectmen on the board, got a letter from a Melissa Foster from 9 Bentwood Street. And she's wrote to us wanting to take up the issue of the plastic bag ban in Foxborough. I know it's a hot topic issue. I discussed it a little bit with Bill. And Bill, you have an idea going forward, bringing in maybe the Mansfield town manager to talk about how they.
Actually, a member of the Board of Selectmen, who's,
Oh, okay.
who's actually serves on I think he chairs the Beautification Across Massachusetts group.
Okay.
And so I'm sure he's a little bit more educated on that particular issue. So I think he might be a good person to bring in.
Yeah, so I think that with the board's approval, in the next meeting or two, maybe we'll have bring him in, he's on the Board of Selectmen, how they did it in Mansfield. Maybe we'll even invite Melissa to come.
And I just want to remind you too, there was another 8th grader last year she was in 8th grade, she might be in 9th grade this year, that's also been emailing about this. So, you know, I commend anyone who's in 9th grade and looking to make change and reaching out to us. So I know she was interested in that too, so we should just make sure that we follow up with her as well.
With her and let her
Yeah.
know too. Yeah, and in the next meeting or two, we'll see when the gentleman's available and get him on first available. We can get him in here and start the process here in Foxborough.
Very good.
Other than that, nothing else from the board? Bill?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple of things I just wanted to bring to your attention. One is the fact that I received some statistics from Rob Vidone, who's here tonight, to just talk about a little about the progress of the new Semrick 911 dispatch center, that's been operational since July 1st, and just an indication of some of the statistics that have occurred between July 18th and August 18th, or 19th rather. And it's quite interesting to see that how these numbers compare to last year at the same time. Taking a look at the calls answered, so in that same time frame is 1,735 calls were answered versus last year there was 682 calls answered. So, and what's driving that, I believe, is the number of cell phone calls. Is that correct, Rob? Would you mind come up for a second just to talk a little bit about your statistics? I'll give them to you so you can cite them, because it's actually quite astounding, and I'm actually very pleased to see that the progress is being made. And the performance is so high in this organization in just a relatively short period of time. So maybe you could just speak a little bit about that, Rob.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I wasn't expected to be speaking tonight, but I'll join Mr. Barros in that. So since we opened July 1st, we opened July 1st on schedule. We started taking 911 phone calls from both Mansfield and Foxborough, and we added the ability to take wireless calls directly. So if you dial 911 in Mansfield or Foxborough, or even near Mansfield or Foxborough, we will take those calls directly into our public safety answering point, the 911 center. So over the past 51 days, we've seen an absolutely incredible increase in the amount of 911 calls that we actually see directly, and that's indicated through in the past, from July 18th to August 19th, we've taken 1,735 911 calls. And that's in comparison to 682 911 calls the previous year, and that's combined Mansfield and Foxborough. We're doing that with a staff of 12 people, 3 on duty at one time. We're administrating pre-arrival instructions, so if you call, you need help with a medical emergency, we're able to give you advanced instructions on that too. And we've actually increased the performance of the center. We have a 14% improvement in the amount of times the phone rings. We have reduced the maximum ring time 54%. Our average call time has gone up because we're providing more instructions to the callers. We are 100% within state compliance with state regulations, and we are taking, of all those 911 calls, we're taking 78% of all of our calls are wireless, so from cell phones. We took 2 text to 911s as well. So incredible statistics. From July 1st, we've taken 5,269 911 calls. That's an incredible statistic. It's on par with the 4 towns that our neighboring partner, the Metacom Emergency Communications Center for 4 towns. It's about 2,000 calls more than they've taken in the same period of time. So it's indicative of the amount of service that these 2 towns demand, and I think we're providing it fairly well. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions regarding that.
If you would, sir, how many people are still calling the 543-1212 lines?
Very little. We've had a pretty successful campaign to reduce that, including our partners in the Central Station alarm business. We've given notice to them that they need to change the way they do business, and they've generally complied with that. We do have a few that trickle through that call the 1212 number, but we've set up processes to make sure that if that happens, that whoever receives that call forwards it into the 911 center through conventional business practices, and they get the help they need. But that has largely been reduced, so I'm happy to report that. That was, I know, a pretty large concern going into this process. So.
Are you picking up cell phone calls from people that are outside Foxborough and Mansfield?
We do. We pick up quite a few from, it depends on how the call's presented. We've received calls as far as New Bedford, Boston, but more regularly from Brentham, Plainville, our contiguous towns. And that if it's a true life or death emergency, we'll start providing instructions and transfer the call. If it's a more routine call, we'll provide the level of instruction that is appropriate and transfer it into the other 911 center.
Now, can you transfer those calls directly to those dispatch professionals in those communities?
Yep, it's all, it stays native within the 911 system. We just click a button. If it's, let's say, a Norfolk call, Metacom services Norfolk, we just click one button, the phone rings, we brief them, and they get all the information we had, and it gets all forwarded. So location data, caller ID data, it all moves with the call.
So Framingham should be thanking you.
Framingham should be thanking us. We also do receive calls from the highway, so we've taken quite a few calls from the highways.
So I thought it was helpful to hear this, because Rob just actually sent this literally to me about 6 o'clock tonight, and I thought it was really interesting information that you should be hearing, because it clearly is a very active operation, and there's only a few people in that center, but they're handling a large amount of calls, and they're doing a great job handling it. The other thing is maybe just to give you, while you're here, just to give a brief update on where the new center is and where that stands at this point.
Absolutely. So we're preparing right now to go out to bid, hopefully at the end of the month, early next month, with the building, and we're still on target to hopefully move in Q1 of next fiscal year and bring on the other 2 towns. it's a tremendous process to get a municipal building, especially as complex as a 911 center, online, but we have a phenomenal team that's working hard to get that done on time. So we're progressing well on that, and hopefully we'll have a bid out on the street in the next couple of weeks.
One of the things we're talking about as well, so you're hearing this is in the early stages, that we're actually talking with other 911 centers to see how we can help them in sort of helping with certain aspects of their operation, just so they can maybe reciprocally help us as well at the same time. So I'm actually meeting with a couple of town administrators and managers tomorrow morning to see if we can maybe lend some help to each other and continue to provide that service. So again, on a more regional basis, but even 2 911 centers helping each other to try and make service better for both of us. So we'll see how that continues to evolve, but it was a great idea that I thought that came out of the 911 center as well as the fire chief, and I thought it was a great opportunity for us to continue to collaborate further.
Absolutely.
So.
With call volumes far exceeding what you expected, obviously you staff to a certain level, are there any changes that need to be made longer term based on the forecast versus the reality?
So we've been in communications with the state 911 department to kind of express our concerns that the forecast, it's a difficult thing to forecast because the phase 1 data for the 911 calls that aren't necessarily precisely geocoded into the town, it's hard to predict where those should have been. So there was a discrepancy between the prediction and what we're actually seeing. Our staff's handling it and obviously handling it very well. But we have been in communication with them moving into the four-town communication center, what that looks like and how we realign our staffing models, and if we realign our staffing models to make sure that we continue to account for that. And hopefully that's tied with funding and other tools to help us ease that. Right now we're less than 2 months in, so we have a pretty good indication of what it's looking like, but a year's worth of data is really what we need to make a sound decision on that. And luckily that'll align well with when we merged all 4 towns.
So no major, we have to make a change now to staff?
No, there's no panic. We've had to just make some changes with breaks and things like that, but nothing, it's a new agency, and I would expect something like that anyway. But my staff is phenomenal, best in the business, and they've been doing really, really well. So
They're flexible, and they're working with them to make it happen. So I'm really grateful for the work they're doing. They're doing a great job.
they're doing an excellent job.
And Bob Murphy, call me in. How many of those 911 calls are really 911 calls?
So I'd say 30% of the call volume is a accidental or abandoned call. We've been experiencing a ton, and this is my plug for a brief public safety announcement. We've been seeing a ton of 911 abandoned calls from cell phones. The new iPhone, if you click the button too many times, or even iWatches with data plans, if you click the button too many times, it calls 911. So there's a campground in both towns. We've seen a ton of kids riding bikes with iWatches on, dialing 911 and abandoning the call. And then the events at the stadium and the Xfinity Center generated a tremendous amount of 911 abandoned calls, which is new to both us, obviously because we're a new agency, and the police and fire departments in both towns, because generally those would never be presented to the town to investigate. Those would usually be handled at the state level and kind of not passed along to the town. So I'd say about 30% of all 911 calls are non-emergencies. And then we have other things where we have a caller, and maybe it's not an emergency, but we're more than happy to take a call. I'd rather people call 911 and need a animal control officer, or there's a pothole, and talk to them, make sure that someone who has an emergency isn't calling a 7-digit number because they're afraid to call 911. So I encourage, if you think you need 911, please call it. If you have one of our sayings is burning chest, call 911, burning question, call the 7-digit number. But we're there to help, and if you call on, it's not an emergency, we'd be more than happy to get you the help you need anyway. So.
Thank you.
No problem. Anything else? Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Rob.
night.
Thanks for short notice. And, thank you for doing that. The other thing is that we just received notification from the state, actually the national ISO agency, which rates every single community with respect to inspections and the ability to actually evaluate inspection processes. And I can tell you that the last time this was done, comprehensively was in 2011. It's now been 2019, it's now 2019, 8 years later. And it's interesting to note that in the ratings that we had back in 2011, our overall subtotal rating was 67.89 in commercial. In residential, it was 67.85 in the residential side. It was the final score. The final scores were 67.89 in commercial and 64.84 on the residential side. In 2019, those ratings have improved rather significantly. They've gone from up to on the commercial side, it's gone to 80.42% to 76.81% on the residential side. So there's been a significant improvement over that span of time in terms of how we're handling the inspectional processes and what improvements have been made. So it actually spans two administrations. That's, you know, you've had Bill Caspara, who was the inspector for a while, for a long time, and then Nick Riccio, who's been involved in the most recent span of time. But obviously, the changes that both of those individuals have made a real improvement in terms of how we're rated by the national agency. One of the things that is limiting, though, is the fact that the state has been slow to adopt newer codes, and as a result, it sort of puts us in a limitation as to how far we can go in terms of getting that rating up. What's important about this particular rating is that it does have an effect upon your insurance rates as residential owners and commercial owners. So the fact that our rates are going up in terms of how we're doing it is actually good it actually interprets better for the residents and for the business owners themselves. So we're pleased to see that and glad to see that we're making good progress in that particular area. So last but not least, I wanted to just ask the board to start considering and to put on your agenda for next meeting a date to close the warrant. You open the warrant for the special town meeting. We need to have a date to close the warrant. My recommendation to you is that you do that for the first meeting in September. And that way we can get the warrant fully put together. Right now, looks like there are about 10 articles for consideration. I expect that number will increase by a few more. So we'll have that for consideration at that time.
So have the Council on Aging as
it could very well be. We could put a placeholder for that. And I would recommend you do that. Okay. And then and we'll take a harder look at that once we have a final all the various articles in. I just want to let everybody know, and we'll let I have a department head meeting tomorrow morning, and I'll let those folks know that we're looking to establish that cutoff point. So I would ask the board to establish that date as being the first meeting in September, Amanda, which is what date? The 10th, which will be September 10th.
So do we need a vote now?
Which is actually going to be the 12th.
Which will be the...
No, 12th's the second.
Oh, okay.
The second meeting, so...
The special meeting.
So I would ask the board just to set a date to close the warrant, which would be, yes, so a vote would be appropriate to do that.
Vote now or vote on the 10th?
I would vote now so that you can then close it on the warrant, on that date.
On the date, gotcha.
On that date, all right? So,
entertain a motion, how should we word it?
to close the special town meeting warrant to be held on November 4th, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah.
To close it on September 10th.
10th.
I got it.
Okay.
We'll try it. I make a motion to close the warrant at the meeting of the Board of Selectmen on September 10th, and to close said warrant at that point.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Great, thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
God, I won't turn the water on.
We still have some action items, though.
You're welcome to stay if you want.
I gotta get out and turn my water on.
Well, there you go. They'll keep your bill down, that's why. That's
Go ahead,
No,
Ed.
I don't like,
a fine. Yeah, there you go.
be the first one in town for 3 years.
We appreciate the entertainment. Garrett.
Ed, you're up. Action item.
Okay. I have to recuse myself because of a person on that list.
All right, I move to reappoint 42 electric workers for a one-year term expiring 8/30/2020.
Second.
Second. Oh, you stole my thunder.
All those in favor?
Under discussion, like similar to my board ones, Kathy, does everyone on this list want to remain? I know it's a long day.
I spoke to Bob Cutler before this, and it's our remaining staff, a few additional people who he's spoken to, and so yes, as we know, everyone will remain active with this stuff.
Okay.
Our first event would be the special town meeting, and the first election is until March, so.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, none, one abstain.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, while you're here, what's the status of the sign? I go by it and I say, where is the sign, you know?
It's coming together now. There was
Okay.
a series of issues dealing with volunteer help as well as scheduling of events on the commons.
Okay.
And Mother Nature over winter.
So do you have a projected timetable at all at this point?
If I could put it up this afternoon, I would have done it with my own hands, but.
All right, so thank you. I just, obviously, we're concerned, we want to see it up. Everybody does, I'm sure, including you. No one more than you. No one more than you. All right, I appreciate that.
It's being taken care of.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Motion to approve Saga State House early liquor license extension request of 11 a.m. for New England Patriot Sunday home games on 9/22/19, 10/27/19, 11/24/19, 12/8/19, 12/22/19, and 12/29/19.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes. Sorry again. So their letter reads like it's all the games, but just to point out, there are 2 games that are not on their list, so this is not for every game. There's 2 not on there. I don't know if that was intentional, but it's every
don't-
game
yeah.
except 9, 8, and 10, I think.
The 9/8 is a night game.
9/8 is Sunday
I think
night.
10, is too, so.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
So it wouldn't affect them.
I think the first letter, though, said every game, so, now that they're coming back and clarifying, just making
this
sure
was-
that they realize.
Yeah, this was clarification. Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion to approve block party application for 122 East Street on Saturday, August 24th.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question on this particular one.
So why don't you finish reading it, we'll get a second, and then we'll open it for discussion.
Okay.
We did get a second.
Yeah, we did get a
Okay,
second.
all right, then I apologize. For discussion.
My question is, I did not have a chance to go down to that location along East Street. And I was just wondering about parking concerns, or is the roadway going to be blocked in any fashion?
The applicant was hoping to use public parking areas nearby, so he, in the abundance of caution, called the office. We had them do this because there will be music, and in the instance that anybody does park on the side of East Street, they will have covered their bases. But what's gonna happen is they're probably going to use like town hall parking lot, and they're going to shuttle their guests back and forth, so as to not provide any blocks in the road, physically for any of the neighbors or anybody traveling down the road.
And they also realize that they're not supposed to have any alcohol in any
Correct.
public way?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Question was answered.
So
Okay,
we
Mr. Chairman.
we can approve this with the stipulation that there be no parking on East Street?
Sure. They don't intend to do that anyway, so I told them after you guys reviewed the application that if there were additional conditions, that I would communicate that with them tomorrow morning, and then this was one that they were fully anticipating you saying, so.
They were actually being proactive
Yeah.
in this case.
All those in favor?
Motion to accept a gift donation of $20 to Veteran Services from Lorraine Hawking to the General Gift Fund in memory of Ted Ellis.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to accept gift donation of $185 to the Veteran Services Department from Peter Vitro Jr., Richard and Norma Lehman, and Brian and Muriel Newton in memory of Ted Ellis.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to accept gift donation of $50 to the Veteran Services Department from Mr. and Mrs. Breslin in memory of Ted Ellis.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
And motion to approve July 15th, 2019 meeting minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? One more, Ed.
Was another one? Good.
Yeah, move to adjourn.
Oh, there you go.
I make a motion. It's early, but we should adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Right.